Hi, welcome to Lovin Sheila, the podcast shorts. Today I want to talk with you briefly about asking for what you want. It sounds so simple, but so many times throughout our lives we go through not asking for what we want, but implying, dropping hints, and just being disappointed because we're not getting what we want. Well, today we're going to talk about asking for what we want because it's so much better than the converse of not asking and being disappointed. So let's talk about this. Another simple subject that we're going to discuss briefly just to help encourage us to be more assertive and ask for the things that we want, the things that make us happy. Before we go any further, I'm going to ask that you take a moment and subscribe to my channel, just a quick little click. Don't forget, I love to hear from you, so give me your comments, share with your friends, and subscribe. I want to talk about asking for what we want because it's important. And one of the things that I found often when I do not ask for what I want is because I don't want to be vulnerable. Because let's just be honest, when we're putting things on the table, when we're asking for what we want, we are exposing ourselves a little bit. And it is a very vulnerable position. And so I know a lot of us have difficulty. I know I've had difficulty being vulnerable at times. But part of getting what you want is allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Allowing yourself to lean into that so you can get what you want. You're not just dropping hints and hoping they understand and they should just get you, because it's a part of communication. Asking for what we want is a part of direct communication, which again goes back to being assertive, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. So we're going to ask for what we want, and we have to be comfortable being vulnerable. Let's start with that, being comfortable, being vulnerable. And I'll put it like this, I'll frame it like this. If I'm going to have the life I want, if I'm going to create the life I want, well, I have to have a strong foundation. Base has to be good. And part of that is opening it up. Like when we start building a house, we don't just start building on top of that. We dig. I had a house built once, and I remember they dug up the soil, and then they did something like they put water in it and like softened it or something like that. So part of our foundation is that we are vulnerable, because it's nothing that we can build without a strong foundation and without some degree of vulnerability. Now, I understand a lot of us have grown up where we had to be strong, me being one of those. But I'm learning to lean into my soft girl and allow my vulnerability to come out more and more, because then, and only then, will I start to actually materialize what I actually want. And so it starts from me being vulnerable, from opening up. And this has been a real process, because you know me, you know my journey. I had to go from protecting myself to survival mode to kind of redefining myself, or getting to know who I am and healing and so forth. So now, starting fresh with my new foundation, getting me to a point where I need to be more vulnerable and more open. And so if I or any of us are going to get what we want, we have to first be vulnerable. And we all know that's something I had to learn, and I'm still learning, because again, as I always say, we are ever evolving, ever changing, ever growing. And if we're not, then we should take a real close look at ourselves, because we should be. And so asking for what we want is a part of direct communication. When I don't get what I want, whether it's a friend, a partner, a colleague, or a server at a restaurant, when I don't get what I want, I leave the situation disappointed. We've been talking long enough. If you follow the show, you know that disappointment is not something that I handle very well. It's another thing, along with vulnerability, that I had to learn some coping mechanisms for that as well. That's another podcast though. And oftentimes for me, when I was disappointed, my first inclination was always to close off, shut down. They're not giving me what I want in this engagement or this relationship, and I'm just gonna have to shut down, because I can't continue to be vulnerable or pseudo vulnerable if I'm not getting what I want. Well, part of the problem was I wasn't being vulnerable, and I was expecting different people to understand what I wanted from them, but I hadn't communicated what I wanted. I was pretty much a self-fulfilling prophecy, because no one was giving me what I wanted. I wasn't asking for what I wanted, and I was disappointed. And I found a line of disappointment in my friendships, in my relationships, many of my engagements. And so I had to take a look at me and say, are you asking for what you want? Are you clear on what you want? And are you conveying this? Or do you expect by osmosis someone to just get it, Should they just get you? Should you not have to use your words to communicate directly? And the answer is, it doesn't happen by osmosis, and I do need to use my words to communicate effectively. So I've had to lean in and try to absorb the disappointment and figure out what I'm feeling so that I can communicate what my needs are in different situations. And I'd say I'm probably about 20% of the way there. I still have so much room for growth. But if I'm struggling with this, I thought maybe some of you might be struggling with this as well. And we are all about growing and getting better, so that's why we're talking about it today. Sometimes we don't feel comfortable functioning in that vulnerability that allows us to ask for what we want. What happens when you don't ask for what you want? Well, you just may never get it. So what harm is there in asking for what you want? People can't read your mind. Sometimes people can't even read a room. So how can you expect them to get even closer and drill in closer and read your mind? So we have to be confident. We have to stand on it, because I think a lot of times we're not vulnerable and we don't ask for what we want because we don't want to be seen weak or needy. But we have to be confident to know that asking for what we want is not a matter of being weak. It's not a matter of being needy. It's a matter that you're confident and you believe that you are worthy to receive what you want. And you're not a person who's going to settle for less than what they want. You have to be confident. Assertive. Needs are more essential because for me, it's a matter of me thriving. In a situation where I'm dealing with impatience and haste, it puts me in a survival. Like, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? It doesn't put me in the thrive mode that I try to operate in. And so I'm very cautious to make sure that my surroundings have people around me who are sensitive and care enough about me to not put me in survival mode, but help me stay in my mode where I am thriving. Communicating that need of mine is like primary, it's essential, I do it with ease. When we don't communicate our wants, we're putting ourselves or our relationships at a disadvantage. I worked for a company, an organization for 35 years. Every year, they gave me a business plan and they told me they want me to deliver this many $1 million a year. So they made it very clear. Yearly, I got a new business plan. And I don't know how they derived it, how they determined it necessarily, but this is what they wanted. May not have been what they needed, but this is what they wanted from me. And then I set myself to achieve those goals. And likewise, in our relationship, I might want to take a trip every month. I don't necessarily want to take a trip every month, but maybe that's someone's want. I want that. That makes me feel like I'm in a thriving, healthy, adventurous relationship. Well, that needs to be communicated. So if you're dealing with someone and he hasn't planned a trip in 4 months, rather than having resentment toward him, and he doesn't even know what you consider something that's valuable to you in your relationships and your involvements. If you haven't communicated that, you're setting the relationship up to be at a disadvantage. So we want to provide the information that is necessary to help us thrive, to help us exceed expectations, to help us to, and if we can't exceed them, at least to manage the expectations or to work toward those expectations. We have to communicate, because otherwise nobody knows, and we're setting ourselves up for disappointment and disadvantage. A lot of us have done the work to make sure that we are safe, that we're in a safe place, that our needs are met. And as we go to the next level, we want to make sure that we're getting the things that we want. And that's why I say so often, I'm creating the life I want. I'm not creating the life I need, because as long as I have a place to stay, food in my belly, and bills are paid, I have everything I need. But that's not a very satisfying life. There's some things that make it better. And those are the things that I want. And in creating the life we want, and if you're sharing it with someone, you want to make sure that you're sharing the things that are important to you to get to the life that you want, to get to where you look like this looks good, this feels good, this is where I want to be. Because otherwise you could be doing all these different things, but you're not quite where you want to be. And talked about it before. I read the book, The Opposite of Settling. In relationships, I can speak for myself. I'm looking for it to be an addition to my life, something that makes it better, that adds a different element, some adventurous spontaneity, some love, some thoughtfulness. So if they don't know what you consider those things to be or what those things are found in, then they can't really meet your needs. And so then it's not set up to be a relationship that can thrive. Because if you're like me, I have no interest in surviving. I did that for 20 years or so. And I want everything to be a benefit. And also I want to be a benefit. But I want to make sure that I'm getting something and the person I'm with is getting something. And together we're working at meeting each other's needs and we're communicating what we want. And so we can have benchmarks and we can work toward those things so we get there. But I'll go back a little further because I talked about over the years, what do you want? First of all, we have to know what we want because I know I had been in limbo for a while. I didn't know what I wanted. I was all over the place and I couldn't because I was so busy in survival mode that I couldn't even put my feet on the ground and say, this is what I want. I just wanted to be not stressed, but that's not a real desire. That's not a real want. That's just a survival mentality objective. All I wanted outside of a non-stressful environment where I wasn't feeling rushed and pressed and felt like someone was impatient with me. I didn't really dig into Sheila to determine what it is that is inside of me that I really want. I wanted creative outlet. I wanted adventure. I wanted love. I wanted thoughtfulness. I wanted kindness. Love that didn't demand a tit for tat. Just something that gave, that I could genuinely give to. In those times of survival, I just wanted some stress-free time. But first of all, we just need to dig into ourselves and know what we want because we can't ask for what we want if we don't know it. Because there have been times when I've been asked, what do you want? And I had no words. I had no response. Whereas once I spent some time and I got out of that survival mode and all the frantic ways of life, I was able to sit down and determine what I want and getting to a place where I can ask for it instead of just sitting here. I talked about this in the last episode where I just sit here and I wait for someone to fulfill my wants and needs. I'm taking more accountability and responsibility and I need to communicate and ask for what I want because I'm not going to operate thinking someone has telepathy and they understand without me telling. In a former relationship, he often bought me flowers. But he bought me his favorite flower. He bought me orchids because he loved orchids, so he'd always have orchids for me. And I was just happy to get the flowers. And I never told him until after we had broken up. He said, what are your favorite flowers? And I told him, and he apologized for never asking, but I also didn't tell. What I got is what he wanted to give me. I didn't get what I wanted. But if I would have communicated, it wouldn't have been such a big move for him to rotate from orchids to Lily, but I never communicated that. And so that's what I want to say. It's just a matter of communicating what you want, what you like, because otherwise people are going to give you what they think they should give you. And some might be intuitive, and there are some who just might get. I've run across people who just got me in the past, but I will say they are few and far between. So rather than just hoping by osmosis you run into someone who really gets you and is keen to what you want and what you need, the other option is to communicate what you want and what you need. Ask for it. See if they can deliver. And if they can't, they may give you a hard no, and then wash your hands expeditiously and move on and continue your openness to receive what God has for you. Continue creating the life you want, because creating the life you want is just that. Finding out what you want, asking for what you want, building upon that. The worst they can say is no, and if they say no, I don't think you're in any worse position than you are right now. So go ahead and ask. Put the words together. Communicate your wants. I'm sure that you've established your needs. I'm sure there are certain things that are in place that your boundaries and your standards have weeded out some people. And now it's time, as we create the life that we want, to make sure that we're asking for what we want. If there's some blind spot, let's take the blinders off and let's address it and make sure that we're creating the life we want by communicating directly and just asking for what we want. This is a simple message. So many of mine are. But I'll tell you, in all these years of my life, I spent a lot of time not asking for what I wanted, but taking what I was given. And sometimes it may have been because that was all they were willing to give, but other times it was just because I did not open my mouth and express what I really want. And so I didn't get it. And so after all these years, sitting here today, and I'm saying I'm ready, I'm able, and I am asking for what I want, and I want to encourage you to do the same. Life looks different when you create the life you want. You feel different when you set things up in alignment with what you really want, with the goal you're trying to achieve. And it may be a growth objective, and that's fine. We can all grow. We can grow together, but we just want to put that on the table. We want to ask for what we want. We want to be transparent, so there's no surprises. Remember that. That's what I'll leave you with today. Ask for what you want. Be vulnerable. Open up. Worst they could say is no. If you're creating the life you want, you got to put some things on the table. Be confident as you move toward creating the life you want, and believe that you can do it. Ask for what you want, because there are people who care and want to contribute and want to meet you where you are and grow with you even. And that's what I'll leave you with today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share, and I will see you on the next Lovin Sheila